Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm just gonna get straight in, and I'm going to be reading for you a short story as someone requested in the comments. It's called The Training Camp, and yeah, I hope you enjoy. Training Camp. It was a normal day in the village of Haverwood. The day started out for the young girl Grace with her mother waking her up. Grace, get a move on, get up. You need to go to work or your master will beat you hard. Grace rubbed her eyes and grinned at her frowning mother. Not if I don't let him. You know I've been practicing. Her mother sighed. Get dressed quickly, otherwise Matthew and your father will have finished all the food. Her mother left Grace alone in the room, and she threw on a basic waist-high tunic, then dashed into the kitchen. She grabbed the last piece of bread, then dashed out the door. Bye, Mama, Papa, see you in the evening. Grace ran through the center of the little village to the biggest house there. A red-faced man greeted her at the door. His expression showed that she was in trouble. You're late, you little brat. I knew we shouldn't have hired you in the first place. Come here for a good beating. Grace laughed at him and said, I didn't want to be hired in the first place. I resigned. The man yelled at her. Oh, no, you don't. You need some sense beaten into you. Okay, she replied, but only if you catch me first. Then she dashed into the outskirts of the area. The wind blew against her face as she ran, making her golden hair flow behind her. Suddenly she tripped and fell, then everything went black. Grace sat up and looked around. Her head ached. She must have hit it when she fell. Then Grace became aware of her surroundings. Fire was raging all around her. She could hear caring mothers' shouts and children crying. What happened? She asked a villager who was running past. We're being raided, knights in shining armor. Oh, great, she said to herself. Then Grace began to dash. Fire blazed in Grace's eyes as she ran around the burning village looking for her family. Mama, Papa, Matthew, where are you? Tears sprang to her eyes. They couldn't be gone. They're still here. Suddenly a cry echoed in the area. Grace looked around and saw her little brother Matthew crouched by the wall, with soot coating his blonde tresses. Come, Gracie, please, it hurts. She ran to him and put her arms around his shoulders. Shh, it'll be all right. Though in her mind Grace doubted her words. Would everyone be okay? They sat there in silence for a few minutes. Then the sound of marching filled the air. It stopped when they were in front of the teenager and her younger brother. The leader looked down at her and said to Grace, What's your name, girl? Can you cook? She considered him. He had dark skin to match his gaze and curly hair, yet Grace could see that he had been through a lot because it showed on his face. Grace. She replied, Grace, yes, sir, I can cook. The man pulled her to her feet and looked her up and down. She is strong, could manage our hard chores, he said to himself. We'll take you on. You will cook for us and wash for us. He nodded to the two men beside him, and they walked forward and pulled her away from Matthew. Gracie, don't leave. Grace looked at him, helpless. I'm sorry, she shouted. Find Mama and Papa. They will help you. She was dragged away and put on a horse, taking her away from all she knew and bringing her to a new life in destiny. The road was long and winding, up and down hills and through lush green valleys. She didn't remember much of the journey, except the cracking of the whip in her ears as she fell asleep on the plodding horse. They arrived at the camp late at night, so everyone was asleep. Grace was given her own tent in the center of the camp. Then she fell asleep. Grace woke up. When Grace woke up, she saw the tent fabric surrounding her. Where am I? Why hasn't Mama come in? Suddenly, it all came back to her. Everything. The long, grueling journey far into the night to get to this camp. She was told that as soon as she woke up, to go to answer the leader's summons. Grace stood up. She ran her fingers through her hair and exited the tent. She walked to one of the men on duty. Sir, where might I find the leader? He looked at her and said, Follow me. He led her to a clearing at the center of the campsite. There was the leader standing alone. Ah, Grace, you have woken. Come here and sit. Grace walked up to him and sat on the stool before him. Tell me, he said, circling her, what is your age? Where do you come from? She stared straight ahead and said, I'm a humble 16 years old, and I am from the village that you so kindly destroyed yesterday, sir. Chuckled. Sir Percival, leader of this army. When Grace didn't say anything, he continued. It was my duty and order to raid the village. We were being cheated and despised. She was so shocked at his words and said, But sir, the people of that village are honest and loving. We would never do that. Sir Percival shook his head sadly. I'm afraid this is all true. After a few more minutes of telling her the rules and tasks, he let Grace go. For a while, she wandered around looking for the kitchen when a young handsome boy who looked a little older than herself came over to her with his floppy brown hair in his face and asked, "You all right? You look lost." Grace looked around, looked at his bright smile, and she herself smiled. "Yes, I am. I need to find the kitchen, but this is my first time here, so I don't know where it is," she replied. "Come, I'll show you. There's quite a way to go, so you can answer my questions on the way." The boy led her to the right, to a dusty path that went through the center of the camp, then said, "I'm Timothy. I've been training here ever since I was 7. I'm Grace. This army destroyed my village and my family. I was taken here to work and cook." Grace replied miserably. Then they were silent until they reached the kitchen. "Here you are. Tell Sir Percival if they're giving you a hard time." She nodded. "Also, find me if you have free time, because the other guys aren't my type of people." Grace turned to leave and said, "I don't think I'll be much better." Timothy grinned at her leaving figure. He liked this girl. They could get to be good friends. Grace walked into the kitchen area, which was a cold, damp room with cooking pans all over the floor. A large woman came up to her and boxed her ears. "Girl, don't just stand there. There are things to do, meat to roast, potatoes to peel and boil. Get a move on." And that was how the days later started and ended, being shouted at to start cooking and being shouted at to start cleaning. She didn't have time to see Timothy until the 7th day of being there. It was a Sunday, so the workers had a day off. Grace walked to the training ground and saw Timothy sitting alone reading a book under the shade of the tree. She sat down beside him, and then he spoke. "I knew you'd come. I was waiting to tell you. The chief cook is leaving, and you're taking her place." Grace gasped. A chief cook. Grace peered over his shoulder and asked, "What are you reading?" Timothy smiled sheepishly. "It's a book on—" When he didn't answer, she took the book out of his hands and read, "The Book for Becoming a Gentleman." "All right, you don't want to be here, do you?" He shook his head. "I hated it ever since I arrived. Being trained to kill all your life. And that being everything." A man walked up to Timothy and told him to come so he could talk to him. After a few minutes, he came back and his eyes were shining. "I wasn't accepted into the army." Grace patted his shoulder. "I'm so sorry, I feel bad." He grinned at her. "Don't be sorry. It was my dream not to go off to war with my life on the line. Now I'm a guard and helper here." She grinned back at him, then threw her arms around his neck and whispered, "Thank you so much, Timothy. I'll be your friend forever. You'll make my time here a lot nicer. I think I might even enjoy it." He smiled. "I'm glad you will. I'll help as much as I can." She let go at him and looked sternly into his eyes. "Do you, Sir Timothy, promise to be Lady Grace's friend forever?" He nodded. "I solemnly swear." And so it was. They were friends for the rest of their lives. In a few years, they were married and moved to a small village where they lived almost happily ever after. But that's another story. There you go. I hope you enjoyed that. Yeah, so please give this video a like and subscribe. And yeah, thank you. Bye.